Oh, good evening. Today is May 26th. It is 5:13. This is the uh, training subcommittee of the Salt Lake City Racial Equity and Policing Commission. And we appreciate the attendance of Commissioner Suarez, Commissioner Andre Weirden, Commissioner Davis, staff, Coletta Lynch and Sven, and Deputy Chief. Deputy or Assistant? I want to make sure I get it right, Chief.
Well, it's actually deputy, but I'm not really picky.
Okay.
You'd be surprised how many things I get called. So
we can promote
any of those is still better.
Got you. All right. All right. Well, we had somebody else there for a second and they disappeared. So just rolling through the agenda. Already kind of did the welcome. There's no youth committee report to be made. So hopefully you've had a chance to, how are you, sir? Hopefully you've had a chance to take a look at the set of recommendation language I put together. I promised that I would just put some language together and send it out very late. So that's certainly my fault. I can put it up on the screen if that would be helpful, and we can talk through it. I can certainly do that real quick. Let me share my screen. If yes, here we go. Why is it not here?
I think we welcomed Franco while his audio was still setting up. So welcome, Officer Franco.
Okay, thank you. Officer Franco, good to see you. Okay, it's down here, so let me see why we can't do it. Share the screen. Oh, well, thank you, Ms. Lynch. So again, I just, took just some of the general conversations we've had and put some language to it just so we can have conversations. Again, I'm not wedded to any of this language. I just wanted to have something from which to begin a conversation. I will tell you, well, let's just scroll through it for a second. I've got a couple, some comments that Officer Norgard sent me, but since he can't be here today. So the first one was just the fact that there's no full-time recruiter for Salt Lake City PD, and we had talked about the importance of that. And so I just put some language in there around the difficulty in recruiting generally and recruiting people of color specifically, that a full-time recruiter could be important in that regard. And currently there's no targeted outreach efforts to ensure or improve the diversity of SLCPD. And this position could ensure a much more targeted approach. And then I just broke out 3 recommendations. One is about the position itself. The other is give it an adequate budget, so if it can or needs to travel, it can do that. And then third, we had talked about the recruiting video, but never put any formality to it. And I think Lieutenant Zaya said the video cost around $20,000 if I remember correctly. So without putting any dollars in it, I just want captured the in recommendations that we made. And then second one is about the oral interview process. And Bob told me, one, that this is no longer correct because Tanya sat in on an interview last week, and Commissioner Prospero has been invited to sit on some other ones. Although my comment to that is, that's great, but there doesn't seem to be any strategic approach to ensuring that there are community members. It's just the blessing of he's a part of this subcommittee and could ask. And so just that comment. And then my issues, or at least what I thought some of the issue language were, I put in here, each and every one of you can disagree because Bob did. And I'll just read you his comments because I told him that I would, happily so. He says, I also disagree that officers, quote unquote, bring preference to those who have done what I put in quotes, police type things. I've had several ride-alongs with folks who I would never recommend for the PD, let alone trust them to make me a cup of coffee. Same with military folks. Some of the best and worst people I've known have been in the military. Security guards, same thing. Regarding criminal justice degrees, or any degree for that matter, they mean absolutely nothing if you don't have the mental and intestinal fortitude to handle the stresses of the job and interact with the public as a professional police officer should. Classroom experience and real world experience are two totally different things. I know some quote unquote leaders in the police world with degrees that are completely incompetent at their jobs. Sure, each individual is evaluated as an individual. He said that there may be preference points on the application for military and college experience, but that means nothing if the individual is not cut out for this profession. So those are Bob's comments. So I would also offer yours. One thing I said to him was that if in fact there are preference points for military or criminal justice degree or whatever, then that provides a built-in bias in the process already, and is that something that we want to continue? And I don't know that Bob is the exception versus the rule, and that's not my intention when I say this, but everybody's got bias. We all bring the bias into whatever it is that we do. And so that's kind of where I was starting in this. It wasn't designed to be a critique specifically, although maybe it sounds like that. And if it does, let's play with the language. But anyway, these were just some of my thoughts. So we can start back with number one, Coletta, and see what you think about just phrasing language. Is this the right way to describe it? Let's just have a conversation.
Still on number two.
I think it's good language to have a full-time recruiter. And I think that first point is critical to anything that we're going to do. And of course, we have to have budget to go along with that. And I think there are enough funds set aside in the process. We can
we lost you a little bit, Reverend. Well, while he comes back to us, other thoughts?
Oh, Pastor, you froze, but I think you're back.
There you go.
Are you able to?
Yeah, saying that I think it full-time recruiter language, the recommendations is good, and the budget, of course, is critical to that. But I think that there are funds that we have asked the budget committee to set aside that we could use for ensuring that there is funds for this.
Okay, thanks. And Chief, if I could ask you just to clarify or confirm that bullet point number 2 is a correct statement.
I think there have been targeted outreach as a normal process over the course of the past several years, but it's not set in policy. So those things are usually brainstormed prior to a hiring process, and we send representatives out into the community to different kinds of community organizations. But yeah, we have made specific efforts to target diverse communities.
Okay, is there a, but you say it's not policy, it's more of a brainstorming, let's make sure we do it this time, as opposed to anything that's written anywhere that this is what we need to do every time we do a recruitment process?
Right, it's not standardized.
Yeah, okay, maybe that's okay. So
it might look like a,
go ahead.
Excuse me, Don. It might look like a group discussion about what might be available. Hey, there's a women's conference. There's a job fair at the community college, and it's more what's convenient in that short term. And I don't know if that's was the correct, Chief, and if I'm selling, I apologize. I feel like that could be so much deeper with a full-time recruiter, sustained intentional relationship building, more than just let's see what we can go do this time. I think that's a critical change.
Right, I agree with that. I think examples are when there was a women's conference at the South Valley Expo Center, And we put up a booth there and sent recruiters out to that. We've sent them to various cultural fairs, those kinds of things. But we do it as they come up or as they present themselves as opportunities, rather than making that a standardized practice.
Gotcha. Other thoughts, Mary Ann or Michael?
I just have a couple of things. I'm just concerned about who this person would report to. Also, is it a sworn person or non-sworn person? And also, it's like Steve said, this has to be a long-term, because you're trying to recruit someone right now when it's opening, it's probably too late. A lot of people that you're reaching out to probably have never thought about it, may not be physically fit, don't know what the process is, have just no idea. So I think that long-term process with a full-time recruiter was not only recruiting people of color, but also women. So I think that's going to change the culture. And that's on that listening session, it seemed a lot of things came up about changing the culture.
Okay.
And that's one of our core principles is documented in our resolution, right? That's one of our, that's in our charter.
Right.
And we need to, diversity through race and ethnicity and various backgrounds is going to be crucial to changing that culture.
Right.
I really feel like in order for us to be successful as a commission, we really need to focus on the intentionality of making this happen. And having that full-time person with clear expectations that these are the outcomes we're looking for is an important thing to do. I also feel like as one of the gaps between law enforcement in the community is that lack of trust. And I've heard several times, some in the closed sessions and some in the open sessions, about the frustration that the officers have that members of communities of color are not coming to the department. My feel as a former law enforcement officer is that'd be great, but we're the professionals and it's our responsibility to reach out and be welcoming and create the kind of culture and climate where folks would want to be a part of us. And I think investing in a full-time recruiter is one way of putting our money where our mouth is and showing that we're willing to go out and take those steps to be able to do that. And I think that's a critical step. I'm very much in favor of this concept.
Okay. So do we need both bullet points? Do we need to I mean, I've heard conversation around language that is, sustainable or strategic or things like that. Do we need both? Do we need to modify the language? Is it helpful to help council understand that there's another issue? I mean, I'm just, help me out here with what you're thinking on the bullet points for the issue.
I'd like to see.
Well, I'd appreciate those of you who have been on departments and are now retired, talking a bit about the difference between sworn and not sworn and what the value of that may or may not be in terms of a recruiter. Can you, Steve, or one of you talk about that?
I'd be happy to. I talk all the time. I think it was Mary Ann's point though, so I'll yield.
Mary Ann, could you share some insight on the value of sworn versus?
Sure. So a sworn is basically a police officer that's hired versus non-sworn would be a civilian. For example, like Coletta, who's hired by Salt Lake City. Who do other duties within the agency. And so my question about this is the issue with sworn is you're already having a hard enough time recruiting sworn. And I worry that if this full-time recruiter position is a sworn position, that would be easy when staffing is low to pull this position out of there and to help with police duties on a daily basis. versus out recruiting. And I think you could find someone who is not a police officer, who has a lot of experience with police and who could actually recruit. So I think that's kind of the differences that I was thinking about.
Yeah, and I agree with that. And in addition to that, there's cost, right? So the civilians tend to be less expensive. And I think that it should be a partnership with sworn officers, but I think the full-time person, I could see how it could make sense if they're a civilian, because they could have a professional background in recruiting rather than foundation of law enforcement where they're trying to pick up another side job, right? So a couple of strengths for me. I see the chief's on.
Yeah, and I try to dance around it in my second sentence of the full-time recruiter, that if it's fruitful, it should be able to support its existence by the new recruits that are hired. So, Chief or Franco, you have thoughts on sworn versus non-sworn?
Well, I think I would add, Dante, that one of the issues that we come across when we assign a sworn police officer to these kinds of not police specific duties is that we have a tendency to rotate our staff on an every 2 or 3 year basis through different positions. And that sort of a job is the sort of thing you really just sort of be getting your feet under you and be rotated out of it. And some of those positions are better with a civilian specialist that doesn't need to be rotated, that doesn't get promoted to sergeant, those kinds of things, so they can stay in that position and really develop. And I think that's one of the advantages.
Okay.
Given those points, I would recommend that we recommend a non-sworn person for the position, as long as we don't box that person in and fail to promote that person in some fashion as well. But there ought to be somewhere that person can go to, like that of sergeant and lieutenant and so forth. But I would recommend a non-sworn person.
Okay, thank you. Officer Franco, you had something?
Yeah, I think the non-sworn would be a good idea as well. Maybe having some officers that's doing a collateral assignment, maybe helping out the recruiting as well, like special events or anything like that, or being involved with that part, just to have a sworn officer there.
Yeah. Similar to what Sergeant Givens does now, I guess. Doesn't he do some recruiting, I think?
Yeah, I don't know.
Okay. And then,
Dante,
oh, I'm sorry. Well, let me
there are other
back to Marianne's point about who should it report to. I mean, should it be in an HR as a liaison to the PD? Should it, I mean, what were you thinking? A dotted line to the command staff? I don't know. What were you thinking?
How Salt Lake City's HR or who's in charge of recruiting. So that's why I'm just curious who they would report to and how because it seems like you'd want both, someone from that command staff and also someone from HR working with both of those.
Commissioner Andrew.
Yeah, I agree with that. You're there for the department and to get the numbers for the department. So I think there should be accountability with the department, but it is more of an HR position. So I don't have a definitive answer, but I could see how you at least want check-in, if not direct report to both sides.
Chief, do you have a liaison HR person now that's embedded in the PD, or how does it sit in Salt Lake?
We have an HR specialist that is employed by city HR, but is directly assigned to the police department.
Right.
And we are her only client, and she coordinates all of our hiring processes and promotional processes. from that perspective. And she gets some assistance from other folks in the, from the city level, but she works within our building and is there with us all the time. I think that's the natural fit for a recruiter, because she coordinates most of the recruiting now. So I think that just having that person report to her would be a natural fit.
Gotcha. Okay. Okay. So it sounds like we are adding the recommendation is a full-time non-sworn recruiter. As I write this down. And then thoughts on the bullet points? Do we need number 2? I guess is my question. No. Go back up, Coletta. Number 2 bullet point on number 1. Under issues, yes, ma'am.
My idea kind of fits both of them, but it is to connect it to our charter of culture change and just articulate. We believe that the diversity that could be brought in specifically impact that culture change.
Okay.
And I do think perhaps we could soften to limited targeted outreach efforts, or maybe less strategic outreach efforts or something. It's not true that there's none. I think you could articulate that it's not enough.
Gotcha. Okay. So how about I'm just thinking out loud, there is currently insufficient ability to sustain or create a strategic outreach effort to ensure.
I like that, create a sustained, in specific, I like those.
Insufficient ability to create sustained or strategic opportunities for targeted outreach. Is that what I said? Outreach, which can help. Where do you want culture change in there? Which can then promote, assist? I mean, does it need to fit in there? What
do others think? I'm wondering if. I apologize, Don. Are we frozen? There, Marianne? I'm wondering if we just do a standalone bullet point, say the mission of this commission is to create a culture change, and believe that this is one important step in doing that.
Did we lose Dante?
I think he's frozen. Yeah. Oh, he's completely out.
My back.
That was like magic.
Okay. Colette, I don't know if you heard my question or could answer it. I just didn't know if you were able to type away on the document while we wordsmith it.
Oh yes, hold on. Let me duplicate the document and then I'll bring it back up to type on it.
Okay.
That's magic.
Wow.
Your question while you were away, Dante, is that concept of culture change and how we hire and who we hire significant enough that it should be its own bullet point?
Oh, okay.
Or I don't know what others think about that, or because we could weave it into either or both, but to me, it seems like it's an overarching concept for both of those next 2 bullet points.
Okay, so 3 by itself is what you're saying could be the increased diversity also increases the opportunity for culture change, better engagement with communities or something like that?
Yes. And I believe when we wrote our, the dialogue we had on the initial resolution, talked for a while about that culture change and find it broadly. We are the Racial Equity and Policing Commission, but we also defined that culture change more broadly with different walks of life and
Right.
sexual orientation, etc. So in recruiting for people of color, I'm not sure that in and of itself is broad enough, although it is a critical piece.
Okay. Coletta, if you could put non-sworn, take out bullet point 4 and just put non-sworn before a recruiter down in the recommendation. Nope, right before the word recruiter, just put non-sworn. No. Well, yes.
Oh.
No, not there. Go down to the box. And right in front of the word recruiter, put non-sworn. There you go. Thank you. I wish I could do this myself. I'm sorry. And then the bullet point 2 under the issues is there is currently insufficient ability to create sustained or strategic targeted outreach. I think that's what it was. To then just take out that little phrase, to ensure or improve the diversity of SLCPD. To ensure, yes. I don't think we need the last sentence then.
Holy cow, I muted myself. Should that be and, sustained and strategic?
Yeah, I think you're right. Sustained and strategic, yes. Thank you. Thank you, Ms. Lynch. Under the box, that's just my misspelling, I guess. Take out the apostrophe and its. Thanks. Okay, how does it look, people? There's currently insufficient ability to create sustained and strategic outreach to ensure improve the diversity. Okay. Does that one work? Okay, who just joined us? Cindy Lou, hello Cindy Lou. Okay, we good to go for number 2? This will be a much more interesting conversation, I think.
And it just brings back such good memories of when I was a deputy chief, and almost everyone who worked for me knew what an incredible idiot I was, and they were willing to voice it to my face how stupid I was, and I could never do anything right. And so Bob's comments kind of remind me of those days, how we could never get anything quite right. But I always was afraid if I made everybody happy that I was doing something wrong.
Right.
You're not one of those college boys he was talking about, are you?
I am, as a matter of fact.
Oh.
Right. But I did go back to school while I was on the job. So I felt like I got.
Yeah, me too. I was almost 50.
Yeah, I was on the 20-year associate's degree plan. First thing I want to say here is multiple perspectives are invaluable. And we define the characteristics that we want in our officers, and we have a diverse hiring board who's all looking for those same characteristics. then we can get a more well-rounded set of candidates, in my opinion.
Okay, so you just said it very nicely, nicer than I did, because what you're then also saying is that if there's only cops on the board, you won't get the opportunity for well-rounded candidates.
Because it tends to be a much more similar perspective. That's right.
Okay, okay.
Again, back to community trust. Should be representation from the community in the people that are going to be policing them. And
Okay.
it's again, let's agree on what those characteristics are, and then we'll measure those. And, I think it makes sense that courage is part of a law enforcement officer's job, because sometimes we have to face very, very frightening things that other people would rather run away from. But we can also, we don't need to come in with tactics, because we can train you on tactics. Now,
Right, okay. So then, I'm guessing we're doing away with bullet point 1, and in exchange, then describing a diverse hiring board or panel to include community members creates opportunities for well-rounded candidates.
yeah, I don't know, is multiple perspectives to different points of view.
Okay, I'm just writing down your words. I'm writing down your words. We can wordsmith it. I'm just writing down your words.
Yeah, I'm not sure what the answer is. The officers do bring their biases, but that may be an impediment. But if we just, I think we all generally understand we all do. And
Right.
The more points, the more perspectives we have, better chance that we have of getting a good measurement on those, again, characteristics we're looking for.
Yeah, and honestly, I mean, we don't need to call out just officers having bias. I mean, I appreciate that.
So at the risk of overstepping my responsibility here, I just want to relate a personal experience. And I'm sure Steve has, and Marianne have both seen this themselves too, but I've been on a number of promotional boards, interview boards, both for our police department and other police departments. And generally the questions are prepared by someone not on the board, but most of our promotional boards are split evenly between community members and members of the police department, either 4 or 6 interviewers. And my experience is when the question is asked, each interviewer gives their own score and their own perspective on how the person responded. And then when you get together afterward to compare those scores, the officer scores and the community member scores often tend to be very similar. Mm-hmm. And so I think that it really depends more on what you're asking than on who's doing the asking. And I'm not at all opposed to including community members in the hiring process. I think it's a great idea. But I think the idea that the officer's bias would result in different people being chosen than if you had community members, my personal experience would differ from that.
I appreciate that. Remind me, but as I recall, you said these panels were not for entry-level cops. They were for either command staff or sergeants or lieutenants, right?
Right, but the grading tended to be very similar between the community members on the board and the officers on the board. That if it was a 1 to 5 score and the person scored a 4, they'd probably score a 4 across the board.
Okay. First, before we even go to the bullet points, I would suggest that we need to change number 2 anyway, because if Bob is able to invite community members to sit on the panel, then number 2 is not a true statement. I would suggest that there is no strategic or policy approach to including, at least for entry level, non-sworn or community members on interview panels. Would that be a correct statement?
Yeah, I think the idea is there's no policy regarding that. So when we put together the oral boards, it can, at this point, it could be just about anybody. So I think your goal would be to codify that it's required to include community members rather than optional.
Okay. So at this point, number 2 is that there is no requirement to include community members in oral interviews for, should we just say entry level applicants or across the board? Chief, is there a protocol for having community members? That's just kind of the way it's done for the ones you're describing.
No, there is no protocol for it, but I've never been involved in one that wasn't done that way, including when I was promoted many years ago. So I think that our police department has made that a standard without ever officially making it a standard.
Okay. So thoughts, commissioners, on how to phrase what it is that we want to say as the reason why we need to do this in the first place?
Are you talking about the title?
Yes.
I think we have to say why in the title, because we'll say that in the issues. But what if the oral interview process should include community members and officers to conduct the oral interviews, and we talk about why we want to do that.
Okay, just as it's a blanket statement by
Yeah.
itself. Okay.
Introduce the concept. Yeah.
Okay.
I'm thinking through a little distracted. I'm thinking through the chief's comments, and we did not have. It's not in my experience. I don't know about you, Marianne. We did not have community on our promotion list, and I think that's a great idea. I think the types of questions that are asked for promotion often include what you've done, your career to be successful, and they can measure that outreach, and there are measurables with that.
And think back to the conversation about the questions in the first place. I mean, I think to the chief's point, it is about some of the questions that are being asked, because
Yeah.
I don't care about your ability to strategically think tactically, because you're going to learn that. So that's not for me the kind of questions that need to be asked. So how are we talking about the questions that will get to the part of what you're describing as a well-rounded candidate?
Yeah. So that jumped out at me as well. Do we ask the questions that, for instance, the question that you posed, the officer encounters a culture that is not the dominant culture in our community, and then how you react to that.
Mhm.
And our goal is that they can work with diverse communities, respecting culture, and still getting the job done. I assume those are some of the similar things that we're looking for. The officers on the call thought about it tactically.
Right.
Community members thought about it specifically as how they would want to be treated if they were encountered in this position. And so in some ways I agree with the chief, but I also just want to push back a little bit the value of that other perspective on there. If you're not already thinking tactically, I think a hiring board, while similar, is still a little bit different than our promotional boards too.
Mm-hmm.
I'm still trying to work through all that. I don't know. Do you have thoughts, Marianne?
Yeah, no, I totally agree with you too. I mean, just like you said, if you're getting promoted, you've been working for 5, 10, 15 years in your career and building things up. And probably on those boards, the community members look to the sworn to say, well, is that something that's good for this officer? Or is this something you're looking for a sergeant versus entry level out of the community into our agency? we're looking for if they know how to talk to people, they know how to interact, they know how to problem solve. So those are the keys. So I'm just wondering if we could also make a recommendation about the interview questions being part where the community members and officers work together to create questions rather than just getting the, you know, typical list of questions that they put together for entry level.
Mhm. Mhm. Okay.
That was part of what my thought was that the community members should participate with the officers in crafting the questions that are to be asked. I think that would be most helpful.
Okay. So before we get to a number 3, let's work on 2 for a moment. So taking the first bullet point away, Coletta, and it would be replaced with the multiple perspectives of having a diverse hiring board, including community members, creates opportunities to hire the most well-rounded candidates. Let's see what it looks like on paper. Was that generally what you were saying, commissioners? By having a diverse hiring panel.
I think that's a good way to put that. So I would agree with the statement.
Okay. So take out number 2 then. So look at the last bullet point and see if it speaks to what you're thinking.
Do we need the first sentence in that, or is that already sort of stated by the position we've taken earlier? There's no legal, HR, or policy reason that non-sworn community members cannot sit on a hiring panel. Do we need that statement at
I
all?
just put it there because it's probably a question council may ask. So I just figured I'd be proactive, but I don't, that's the only reason I put it there. I guess, what is your?
I think by taking the position that we've taken in the previous statement and by the latter part of that, non-sworn evaluations should not be evaluated police strategically or tactically thinking, which will be taught by the academy. I think that helps us out, and we could do away with the first sentence. My view.
Other thoughts? Okay, we can remove it. Okay. So is that the right language for the recommendation? Or does it need to be language around either policy or practice? Well, not practice, but how do we embed it into the process?
Is it want to give the department props for adding that in other areas, for adding community in other areas. I was previously unaware of that. I wonder, is there value in saying something to the effect of, as a practice, the department currently utilizes community members for emotional examinations. I think they should be included. They should be codified and they should be included in this area as well. Is there value in that? Does anybody else think?
Yep,
Because
I see where you're going with that.
Yeah.
I think we'd be saying they're already doing it, so it's not that different to add on.
Exactly, and then it kind of dovetails with Dante's idea about framing it for people who may not be familiar with the policy and practices of the department. But they already do it. And we're just expanding that.
So the recommendation would be, we could just say similar to promotional oral panels. The recommendation is to require community members to be a part of all, to be a part of the, I'm thinking out loud, similar to promotional panels. Recommendation, no, not there, in the box. Similar to promotional hiring, promotional panels, require community members to be a part of. Is that all we need to say, or you want to add some more to that?
Do we want to firm up the practice for promotional panels as well? Right now, it feels like it's voluntary.
Yeah, that's true. How about similar to the practice of having community members on promotional panels, require, what do you want to say, required? Help me on that.
Participation, inclusion of
help me out, Chief. What's the word that would, what's the language that would embed it in a policy, or not just a practice, but I used to write policy all day. Help me out.
I know.
I think your safest bet is to keep it as simple as you can.
Yeah.
And hello, Kitty. I would go with language that simply states it's the recommendation of the commission that citizens participate, or community members participate in all oral panels, promotional and hiring.
So having to require.
We want to get you props for your current practice, Chief.
Yeah, no, that's very nice. Yeah.
Well, I appreciate that. I had no idea it was even unusual.
Just to me, I don't know how. I may be one that doesn't know.
So to be a part of all oral interview processes. Oral interview panel.
I think you need to throw in that it's a new hire. It's not just
Yeah. On all new hire interview process, oral interview processes. Sitting on any oral interview panel. It's similar to the current practice of, at the very beginning, similar to the current practice of having committee members on promotional panels. Require committee members to be part of all new hire oral interview processes, sitting on any oral interview. Well, do we need to, I don't know if we need that phrase then, sitting on any oral interview panel, do we? Processes with the same, I don't think we need that phrase. Is that a little more concise?
My phone is about to die, so I'm gonna leave you all.
Okay, thank you.
Sorry.
Robert. We will get you the final piece of here to take a look at before next week.
All right, thank you.
Have a good night, Pastor. Can we flip it? Go back to the chief's idea. It is a recommendation to require community members are a part of all new hire oral interview processes. And what do you want to say? And require, I'm just saying, we'll just put that out as our, and then increase
Okay.
practice.
Require all of new hire oral interview panels.
Yeah, so let's just get our first recommendation tight, and then add to that. We also want to see that.
Yeah.
Practice.
So a second, recommendation number 2. So that would be number 1.
There.
And then number 2 would be promotional panels.
That's wise to split those.
Yeah, okay. Marianne?
Requiring just require community members. I don't think all community members are going to be on the board.
That's a big room.
Okay, so that's first sentence is number 1.
You could do it like voice, voting on the voice.
Right.
So am I moving the first sentence up to bullet 1?
No. So just make take similar and hit the enter button, and that'll be number 2.
Gotcha. Okay, thank you.
So we'll put numbers on the recommendations in a minute. Is the recommendation require? Just take out is the recommendation too. Just start with require. Correct. Community members be part of all new hire oral interview panels. Okay. And then number 2.
I cannot.
I'm sorry. And then number 2. So just take out the first phrase and just, because right, Steve? Starting with the similar to, how do you want to say it? Require the continuation of community members on all promotional panels.
There.
This would be number 2. Require the continuation of community members on promotional panels. Is that it? And then take out the second half of that. No. Huh?
Yeah.
Oh, I'm sorry. You're right.
That's right.
Yeah.
So you want me to take out number 3 completely?
Yes.
Okay.
Okay. Is that right, folks? Okay. So then, are we ready to go to questions?
I'm just, the reason my lips are moving is because I'm reading the.
And this is how they taught you in college? Okay, so let's just make a bullet point, or not a bullet point, a recommendation number 3, space, Ms. Lynch. Okay, so 3 would be, how do you want to phrase 3? It was, I mean, how do you want to say it?
What we're talking about is developing
Dante,
questions.
didn't you say that? Yeah. And
Right.
didn't you, oh, sorry, Steve. Dante, didn't you say that you were hired by Portland Police to help them create questions?
Yes, yes, there was a small group of folks, but their recruiter, who was a sworn officer from their department, the psych, the doctor who does the psych evals, another LEO, and myself and another community member all helped to create questions. How about evaluate? I mean, we need to evaluate the current questions and determine what their impact on well, I don't want to use the word evaluate twice, and determine their impact on hiring, in short. Is that close? Okay.
I think we start there and then just go into some of the issues.
Yeah, okay. So then, first bullet point would be, well, I mean, how do we want to talk about how the questions may be written that don't really allow the best evaluation of the whole person or their understanding of culture and the world, not their own?
Maybe a little bit on you here, but conceptually that's right. We're looking for the types of questions that bring out the characteristics that we want in our officers.
Okay, perfect. That could be bullet number 2. Why are we doing this? So say that again. Oh, okay.
Come on, man. We're recording this. We'll have to play it back.
That is on top of it.
Okay.
Chief, with the what's the Merit Commission in the city, but with the dissolving of the
Civil service.
civil service, yeah, this is under the purview of HR now to develop these, right? Not
Right.
Yeah, and so the recommendations are
Internal? It can be internal. Okay, okay, good. So what's the adjective describing characteristics that you want to put in there?
I don't know, but it'll also beg the question of what they are, because they'll need to be defined, right? Find those characteristics and then write questions that would measure those.
Yeah. I mean, you want the desired characteristics in officers. I'm just missing a word here.
Yeah. Yeah.
We can play with the language.
Well, I'm also wondering if we weave in there serve the department.
Mhm. Okay. Any other kind of bullet points to describe? Chief? You up?
What's that?
No, I just thought you were going to say something.
No, you'll know. Loud and overbearing.
That works. Okay. Any other descriptions of why that need to be in the bullet points?
Yeah, I'm not sure if we need to put something in there that, let me think about that for a second.
Okay. Okay. So we can come back to the why, but then if we create a little box for Coletta, what would be the actual recommendation? That I think the Reverend said, and police are jointly involved in creating the questions, something like that.
Dante, can you repeat that? I'm sorry, my Zoom froze.
Ensure that police and community are involved in co-creating the questions, the interview questions. Anything else missing in that recommendation? Would it be a new set of interview questions? Or does that say what we want it to say?
Are they developed each time, or you rotate?
No, we generally develop new interview questions for every hiring rotation. So that someone that is unsuccessful this time can't just memorize them and come back the next time.
Yeah, yeah.
So
Okay.
Yeah.
Other thoughts on number 3?
Conceptually, those bullet points are right, but we'll have to wordsmith, right?
Yeah, okay. And since they rotate all the time, would it be evaluate the current approach to the interview questions and their impact? Because it's not well, I mean, it is the same. I mean, it is evaluate the interview questions each time, but I would suggest it's also the approach to the interview questions, to your point, Steve, about what it is that you want to learn. Does that add anything to the conversation?
Just looking at title for this section,
Yeah.
and I'm wondering if we evaluate current approach to interview questions and determine their impact on hiring, and co-develop. Is that too? Doing a run-on sentence there and co-develop interview questions.
Well, but and then we're just rewriting the recommendation twice.
But it's two parts, right? It's evaluation and participation in development. Evaluation of the process and participation in development.
Right. Um, So maybe that's two recommendations.
Maybe.
One is, yeah, I mean, one is the evaluation and its impact. Although, you know, its impact is, I would say, maybe more subjective than objective. Evaluate the questions to determine the desired outcomes is really what we're talking about. To your point, what are we looking for?
Mhm.
Right.
Right. How are we evaluating those candidates and what are we looking for in those candidates? Are we looking for tactical, which we've kind of heard in the past meetings about that? Or do we want someone that has an ability to interact with people and people that are different than them?
You know, I think our current process is evaluating, looking for personality characteristics, because we realize that the majority of the candidates we see won't have any reference to law enforcement. So we talk about life experience. Most of our questions are about life experience or experiences that they've had in their personal life or in the workplace that would give an indication of character and their personality more than aptitude. Because we can, like you mentioned earlier, we can teach all of the tactics. We can teach you how to be a police officer, but we can't teach you how to be an ethical human being. So those are the kinds of things we try to determine.
Okay.
All those things are really good characteristics to look for, but I think sometimes those biases come out when officers are evaluating them because they're looking at how does that play out to be a tactical, is that guy the guy I want to work with tactically? And I say this because we heard this in past meetings, so I just think it's really, and I know it from my own experience too, is that we start thinking we want people who are just like this. And that's not always a good thing, especially if Steve's trying to hire.
Okay. So are we? Are the characteristics written down, Chief? I mean, I know when you get the interview form and it's got, you know, it's got A, B, C, and D you're looking for, and did they say anything like this, and did they, you know, address this? Is that where all that kind of resides?
Right. Well, human resources creates the questioning process and hands it off to the officers, and then they give them a sort of a guide as to how to evaluate the answers. And so it's sort of just is prepared by civilian human resources people.
But who's preparing the questions? HR?
Usually the human resources does it.
Oh, they do. Okay. 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 So Marianne, to your point, what do you see is missing here, if anything? Or the language needs to be adjusted, or to get to your point?
I think, well, this would kind of go hand in hand with a lot of people looking at them. So, but I like what we're doing. We're evaluating it, what the current approach is, and then kind of hopefully create new questions with it help, you know, with the equity officer, the new recruiter, people that are out in the community hearing different things. So I think this is a good start.
Okay. So in the box, we need two things. So what's up there now would be number 2 and no, go in the box. Yeah. Just hit the space, hit the return. Okay. Well, hit the return after number 1. Because what's up there now would be number 2. Oh, sorry. I'll fix this when you send it to me. So number 1 would be the evaluation part, and number 2 would be to create the questions, right? So number 1 is evaluation of current approach and desired characteristics and those kinds of things. Steve, you're frowning, so start talking.
All I'm thinking is, if we're gonna evaluate, we're gonna authentically evaluate. We can leave open the idea that they're doing it well.
Mm-hmm.
So I think I'm thinking about it, if necessary, co-create additional questions, right? If we can already agree the questions are good, then
okay, yeah.
Leave it, because I think I want to acknowledge what the chief just said. I think that is the effort.
Mm-hmm.
The effort by HR is to measure those characteristics.
Right.
I've never interviewed in Salt Lake City, and I don't know their questions. I haven't seen it work very effectively, or to my satisfaction as a member of the Racial Equity and Policing Commissioner. And I think that re-evaluating these with an equity lens, in addition to a professional HR unit writing questions for a police department, get a better, well-rounded question. So I suspect that'll be the outcome.
Yeah.
Let's evaluate it and then revisit it if we need to.
So co-create additional questions as needed?
Yeah, I like that.
Okay. And then 3 is that community and police are co-creating as needed.
I like that too.
How are we looking, folks? Chief, does that work? Does that kind of fit where you're thinking, or what you think you're doing already that would be workable?
I think it absolutely is workable, and I think you're headed in the right direction.
Okay. Officer Franco, thoughts?
Looks amazing. This is above my pay grade. You guys are doing great.
I appreciate you holding on, man. I thought I was looking to see if you were still in the meeting.
I'm still here.
Appreciate it. Appreciate it. Okay. Well, I think we've done a good job of wordsmithing 2 and creating a new one. Like I said, since we don't have anywhere near kind of a quorum of the committee, I don't want to say we're done. And next, is it next week is the full commission meeting, correct, Coletta?
That's correct, Dante.
So the 2nd. So we won't have these done to present to the full commission next week. But I think we could put it out there, and maybe at that, if things would work, maybe we could even kind of all co-create this to see how well it works, and the other committee members from this committee would be there. We might be able to get 3 recommendations approved, or certainly hear from more folks if that works. That sound like a reasonable kind of next step?
It does to me. My experience with that discussion in the full commission is questions will be asked about how we select these community members. So maybe we can give some thought to who they would be, and how we. Pretty sure that'll come up.
Okay. Yeah. All right. So no, nice work. Nice work. I will make sure Bob knows we took his comments to heart. So it's all good. And that's kind of, and the last bullet point was, at least for the agenda, was just any thoughts on kind of overall recommendations as we offer something to finish the work. Thank you, Coletta. I'm sorry I had to make you admin assistant on this process.
Thank you, Coletta.
You all are welcome. It was my pleasure.
Now turn your camera off and yell at us. That's all right. And we had talked about just kind of thinking about overall recommendations as a theme, not any real specificity, but wanted to make some overall thoughts. So I didn't know if anybody's had an opportunity to think about those things, or any thoughts you want to leave us with as we step into the full commission meeting next week, which we can just hold off and do it there, but just didn't know if there was anything rolling around to start with.
Talking about how to wind down.
No, what overall kind of generic recommendation might be made without any real specificity, but more of a commentary of what we would like the police department to be, I guess is my way of describing it. So just some things to think about is an overall commentary, both to the command staff and to the mayor, and letting them know kind of the commission's thoughts as an overall hope for the outcome of this work, and picture of a new culture at the PD, if that's necessary, just something like that. I don't know. I'm just kind of thinking off the top of my head at this point. Okay. So for next week, we'll put that on the agenda for next week, certainly. Okay. Anything else for the good of the order?
I just say briefly how much I appreciate Bob out there.
Yeah.
So much of the language that the officers have given us has been couched or reserved. So I appreciate him saying it how it is from his point of view.
Mm-hmm.
I obviously don't fully agree with him, but I really, really appreciate him saying it. And I think he made some points as well.
No question. And I certainly let him know that from my perspective, and I will tell him the committee also thought the same.
Yeah.
And Chief and Officer Franco, I certainly do appreciate you being here to offer your thoughts and help us think through some of this. That is valuable. And, none of this I don't think is designed as a criticism of what currently exists. It's really about how do we move and make the next best step happen if that's there to be happening. So truly appreciate it.
Well, I'm nowhere near as eloquent as Bob Norgard, but I do the best I can.
All right, well, we'll give you another star one of these days. You'll be all right.
It's just so important for law enforcement to hear that equity perspective and that community perspective in our practices. The more we can accomplish that, we don't have to give away. We can still be a professional police department. There are so many things that are critical in professional policing, but where we can, so much latitude, so much change. If we can get that audience and we take it, right? That's the way I look at it. It's not a criticism; it's just a way to improve.
I absolutely 100% agree with you, Steve. I think that, I way early on in my career when COP first started, I was a COP officer, and one of my jobs was to go around to community meetings and those kinds of things, and fill that role of interacting with the community. And you learn so much more when you get outside of your echo chamber. And if you're open to hearing what people have to say, even in those cases where you don't agree with it. So I think it's a great opportunity for us to sit around and hear.
And we appreciate you being willing to do that. So
Absolutely.
Makes a big difference.
You too, Franco. I really appreciate I trapped him for about 3 hours on that. Appreciate
All right.
We'll make it up. We'll make it up by having him go out and take 3 hours worth of extra calls later.
I was gonna say time and a half, man.
Yeah, I'm down.
Okay, everybody. Well, I think that's a wrap then. And we're right on time. So much appreciate the wordsmithing and the engagement and the brain dump on all this today. I think it was really helpful. And I think I'm positive and we'll be able to take something next week to the full commission. And they can see that you're earning all your money. So that's a good thing. So until then, stay safe and have a great rest of your week.
Thanks, everybody. See you guys.
Night.
Thanks. And Coletta, you can just send me that document and I'll clean it up.
Okay, I actually just sent in an email.
Okay, perfect. Thank you.
All right, y'all have a great night.
All right, you too.